Hey guys, Matthew, and today I'm going to bring you guys another video on the state of the game. So in this video, we're going to be looking at a patch which was restartless. Now this didn't make it to their Twitter, it didn't make it to Reddit, so it's just basically like a ghost patch, if you will. And I want to talk about some of the changes that they made and why, honestly, it makes them look really, really dumb. Not just that, we're not just going to make fun of GGG, we're also going to try to be constructive and explain why these the changes to harvest were incredibly bad, and why itemizing essentially is dead, right? Crafting is dead. Actual endgame items being created is essentially dead, right? Now, a lot of people might be thinking that I'm being, that I'm overreacting or that I'm exaggerating, but no, that is actually the case. And we're going to be looking at a few examples in this video. So, I'm not going to be talking too much about Liquid Calandra changes. TLDR is that you're not going to feel any of this except for the imprisoned launchers of additional essences. Everything else is, yeah, okay, the reflections are going to be a little bit easier, but in terms of rewards, it's not going to be any real difference. Now, another change that they did is to Beyond and the Tainted Currencies. Now, this is funny because they actually murdered Tainted Currencies so fucking hard that they're useless anyways. So I don't know why they would give us more of it, because it's like giving you like an actual bag of air, and then you're like, wow, what am I supposed to do with this? This is useless. And then like, oh, okay, my bad. And then they give you another bag full of air, and then you're like, well, I just told you this was useless. And they go, yeah, but now you have more of the useless stuff, which is like, oh, great, dude. Because tainted currencies, and the most useful one was essentially the tainted fusing, had a 50% chance to actually link an item. So the way that you would go about it is that you would benchcraft, which is very cheap, 4 links, because even if it costs you divine orbs, and then you could have a 50-50 chance of going to a 5 link, and then a 50-50 chance to go to a 6 link, which made it very cheap and affordable to get actual 6 links, right? Especially on corrupted items. Now it's about a 10% chance to succeed. So it's literally 5 times harder, and because when it goes back down, you have to link it again on the bench, it's technically more than even 5 times more expensive. And because it's like, it's not like it's a 1 and 2, right? And then 1 and 2, which makes it a 1 and 4. It's not gonna be like like 5 times harder than that. It's actually way harder, because it's a 1 in 10, right? To actually get from 4 link to 5 link, but then it's another 1 in 10 to get from 5 link to 6 links. So it's actually literally like 25 times harder than it used to be to get a 6 link via Tainted Currencies. So this is a big joke. Absolute trash. I don't even know why they decided to re-add them to the game if they were going to give us to them in such a very sad and useless state. But in today's video, I mostly want to talk about Harvest, because, well, here's what I said at the beginning of the video when I said that we were going to laugh at some of the decisions that they made. Here you go. Reforge an influence item with reforge an influence rare item with a random modifier, including influence modifier, now has a cost of 5,000. Previously 50,000. Okay, so this is a reduction of 10 times the amount of cost, right? Who in their right mind came up with the idea that it was a good idea to price a Chaos Orb? Because this is essentially a Chaos Orb, which does guarantee you 1 influence modifier at 50,000. It's ridiculous. Synthesize an item, right? For synthesize implicit, had a cost of 50,000. My guy, I can go into an Uber Cortex or a regular Cortex with the nodes on the tree, and I'm literally going to drop thousands of synthesized items in one Cortex. Why would I care about paying 50,000, right? Like, are they even thinking when they come up with these actual numbers? This is ridiculous. Now it got changed to 10,000, which is way more reasonable, right? No, it's not. Harvest is dead, not because of the cost, but because of the usefulness of the crafts. I don't understand why they don't get this. And yes, I'm a little bit upset, because this is something I'm passionate about, way more so than the Arch Nemesis changes or anything like that. Crafting has always been my bread and butter, and what I really thought was the beauty of Path of Exile, and seeing it being decimated and itemization having absolutely no options other than basically grabbing a fractured item and throwing essences or fossils at it until I get something usable, and then crafting 1 modifier at it and calling it good enough. That is horrible for the longevity of people who actually make a lot of currency or who play the game a lot or who want to aspire to having good items. There is no itemization route. There is nothing you can do to get good items in the current state of Harvest. And guess what? Harvest has always been pretty much the only way to realistically get really good items, right? Now you could say Recombinators, but the thing is Recombinators worked in tandem with Harvest. Recombinators without Harvest would have worked, and a Harvest without Recombinators would have also worked, but without either of those, itemization is essentially dead. It's donezo. And let me actually give you guys an example of that, right? So you might be wondering, why is it so dramatic? Okay, so I'm gonna give you guys two examples here. The first one is a +2 amulet, right? The way that we use to make a +2 amulet is that you would start, and this is basically pre-nerf, right? Pre-nerf. You would have a +1 amulet, +1 all skills on your amulet, and then you needed one open prefix in order to basically be able to force on the second +1, and then, or at least one open prefix, I should say. At least one open prefix, and then you needed a maximum of one open suffix, and then you needed an augment X, whatever it was. So if you had one open prefix, and then you had a maximum of one open suffix, so that you could craft cannot roll attack mods, all right? This is all you needed to deterministically make a +2 amulet. Now, don't get me wrong, a +2 amulet is a very endgame item, so when I say all you needed, there was definitely a cost there, and there was a requirement of having an augment. But still, this was a very reasonable way to give you such an item that was very, very endgame, right? You need one open prefix, a maximum of one open suffix, you cannot roll attack mods, and then you augment like fire. Because you cannot roll attack mods and you have no open suffixes, because you're going to be crafting cannot roll attack mods for that one open suffix. There's no other open suffixes. There's at least one open prefix because you can't roll attack mods. Let's say you augment fire. The only outcome is +1 fire. So you'd end up with a +2 fire amulet, right? This was very, very good. It was intuitive. It wasn't too hard. Now, if you had more than one open suffix, you could actually craft a fodder mod, which would have been, say, multi-mod, which would basically just be stuck there as just to make sure that you had no open suffixes on the item. That would have also worked. Now let's talk about crafting a +2 amulet post nerf, because you'll see there's a massive difference here. Now the way that it works is that it essentially removes an item, or sorry, a modifier, the same way that Ashling does, right? It crafts that add and then removes. So the fact that it adds before it removes is actually very important, because if it removed before it added, what I'm about to say wouldn't even work. So the only reason that it works is because it adds before it removes. So what you need now is sort of the same thing that you needed before. You needed one to all skills, and then you needed one open prefix, right? So this hasn't really changed, because you need an open prefix to be able to force on whatever modifier that you want, and then you need your other +1. Right? Now, here's where it changes a lot. You need 3 open suffixes, which means essentially if there's any suffixes on the item whenever you pick it up off the ground or whatever you do, say you alteration spam for +1, which is like 3,000 alterations or something, and then you wriggle a suffix, you're already boned. You got to get rid of that suffix. And the reason you need 3 open suffixes is because you're going to have to craft multi-mod, because you need to craft 2 actual meta mods, which will allow you to then deterministically do this. So you need to craft meta mod, and then you need to craft prefixes cannot be changed, because it's going to be removing a modifier, which means you essentially need to protect your prefixes, your +1 all, and also because it's going to add the fire before it removes, your +1 fire as well needs to be protected. So we need to lock our prefixes, and then we also need to have cannot roll attack mods, right? If you don't have cannot roll attack modifiers, then it's going to give you fire damage to attacks or cold damage to attacks like 90% of the time, or even more than that. So you need to have cannot roll attack mods. Now, the difference here versus here is that here you essentially need an open prefix and cannot roll attack mods, and then make sure you have no other open suffixes. So if you had 2 suffixes already, essentially that was good to go. Otherwise, you had to multi-mod to actually lock in that last suffix, and then you needed an augment. Now you need to have the same situation in terms of prefixes, but you need 3 meta mods in terms of suffixes, right? And then, because you need to have 3 open suffixes, it means that if you don't have 3 open suffixes, you need to wipe your suffixes before you're able to craft the item, which is another 2 divines, because you need to actually wipe suffixes with prefixes cannot be changed plus scour, right? So that's another 2 divines. Now the price of this whole thing, the pre-nerf method, was essentially two exalts. No, sorry, 1 exalt for cannot roll attack mods, and then whatever the price of the augment was. An additional 2 exalt if you also needed to craft multi-mod to basically act as a fodder mod or a block. Now, with the new one, you essentially need to craft multi-mod, which is 2 divines. You need prefixes cannot be changed, which is 2 divines. You need cannot roll attack mods, which is 2 divines. You also need the augment. If there's a suffix already on there, you won't be able to do this deterministically, so that's another 2 divines to wipe it. And then not only that, once you actually go through the process and you get your +2, you end up with multi-mod, prefixes cannot be changed, and cannot roll attack mods. One of those is going to be gone because it's going to remove one of those. So essentially, you're just going to have 3 or 2 completely useless suffixes. So you also need to multi-mod it again, right? You're actually going to have to multi-mod your amulet after the fact, because otherwise you're not going to have any suffixes. So you're going to have to multi-mod for another 2 divines with whatever stats that you want. And not only that, because they're stats that are multi-modded, they're very limited and they're also quite bad. Before, if you had an amulet with, say, T1 crit multi and +1 all, and then let's just say 43 dexterity on it, right? Then you could craft on cannot roll attack mods, augment fire or cold or whatever, get your +2, the multi would stay, the resistances would stay, and then you'd also have an open suffix to craft on whatever you wanted, or an open prefix if you had an open prefix. Now you've got no suffixes. You essentially just come out with the end result, which is +2 amulet, and then you need to remove crafted mods, and that's all you have. That's it. So you've got 2 different ways to go about it. Either your multi-mod, which adds another 2 divines like I just said and whatnot, or the other option is that you actually metacraft it. So you craft on prefixes cannot be changed, and then you reforge, say, crit for crit multi until you're happy with it, and then you essentially can go with like an ashling or something like that to get the 5th modifier, and then you can craft on the 6th modifier. But of course, that's when we're talking about literally perfect item crafting, which does not apply to pretty much 99% of the players. However, this was very affordable for a vast majority of people. Yes, the augment tended to be a couple X or a few X, depending on which one, and a +1 amulet may not have been the absolute cheapest thing in the world, especially if you wanted other decent modifiers, but it was still multiple times cheaper than the post-nerf method. Now, not only that, this is basically just one example. It's the same thing, for example, with scepters, right? Getting +1 physical on a scepter required you to have +1 all, and then you needed to craft on cannot roll attack modifier, augment fizz, that guaranteed you +1 fizz. Now you need to have multi-mod, prefixes cannot be changed, and cannot roll attack modifiers. It's significantly more expensive to craft just about any item, which is considered not even insane, but just pretty good. But that's not it. Let's talk about another type of crafting which was completely decimated, and that's Awakener's Orb. I don't even know why Awakener's Orb exists anymore. Essentially, the way that you would go about it with Awakener's Orb is that you would take 1 suffix on an item plus 1 suffix on another item, right? Which would give you basically 2 suffixes. And then when you Awakener's Orb, if you got a 3rd suffix, it was not the end of the world. It was just like, okay, whatever, my suffix is full. If you had 3 prefix, however, what you could do was basically, let's say you had 3 suffixes, okay, 3 prefix would be bad. So what you could do is you could use Harvest to do reforge keeping suffixes. Now by doing this, 90% of the time or 95% of the time, you would actually open up a prefix slot, and then you could actually basically lock suffixes, and Veiled Chaos was pretty much the cheapest route that you could go with, so that you could unveil for a decent prefix like %life or maybe avoid ailments, and then you could finish off the craft with just crafted life. Or for more endgame options, you could also reforge, say, caster on a hunter chest to get +1 curse, and then you could lock in your suffixes and go for an Iceling if you really wanted a perfect item, right? Like a 6 modded item, and then you could craft on life, and that was also quite good. Now, the reality is that it's vastly different. The way that it works now is you need 1 suffix plus 1 suffix, or 1 prefix plus 1 prefix, same thing, and then you'll end up with 2, right? Now, the difference here is that even if the starting point is the same, post-nerf, if you get 3 suffixes, right, it's still okay. Literally nothing changes. However, if you get 3 prefixes, it's bad, but here's the thing. You can't do shit. You can't do anything about it. Your best course of action is to annul. Now, here's the problem with annulling. Obviously, because you've got no open prefixes so that you can't lock your suffixes, you can't do it safely. So when you actually go ahead and hit that annul, if it hits a suffix, and it hits one of your 2 suffixes that you care about, your item is bricked. If it hits your 3rd suffix, right, that you don't want, that's perfectly fine. But guess what? An open suffix is not going to allow you to do anything to work the prefixes, so you'd have to annul again. If you hit a prefix, then only, and only then, can you actually lock your suffixes and hit it with a Scour or Veiled Chaos to go to the same spot. So the big difference is that instead of being deterministically able to reforge keeping your suffixes so that you could basically keep crafting on your item, which for some people could be literally a full day's worth of grinding or multiple days worth of grinding, now you essentially have to gamble and annul, and if you get wrecked, you get wrecked, right? There's no recourse. There's nothing you can do about it. Not only that, and here's the crazy part, if you annul one of your 2 suffixes, right, that you wanted on the item after the Awakener's Orb, you've got no course of action to save the item whatsoever, because you can't imprint an influenced item, right? It's imprinted, you can't do anything about it. You can't, you'd have to imprint the item before you Awakener's Orbit, so that when you imprint it and you Awakener's Orbit, if you actually go through and you need to annul and you brick it, the only thing that you can do is re-imprint it to the state where it would have been pre-Awakener's Orb, which would mean it would only be 1 single influence and 1 single base. So essentially, you would have spent whatever you spent getting the 2nd base, plus the Awakener's Orb, plus, of course, the potential metamods, the annul, stuff like that. And also, the biggest thing, the amount of time that would take to do all of that is all completely wasted because, and only because, they decided for some reason to get rid of reforge keeping prefixes and reforge keeping suffixes, which were, I would argue, the most integral craft required to actually be able to deterministically craft items in the game, or at least to be able to save you from these situations where you essentially are stuck into just needing to gamble. And the funny thing is, they actually called these crafts filler crafts, which is just about the biggest slap in the face that they could ever give to us people who actually really enjoy crafting. Because they can throw around that word and just call them filler crafts when they're talking to a large audience who don't really know anything about crafting. But anytime that you talk to somebody who has even an absolute minimal amount of knowledge in regards to crafting, are going to tell you that without this reforge keep prefix, reforge keep suffix, essentially crafting items with harvest is completely dead and you should just forget about it. It's just like playing the lottery at that point. And when you're investing that much time in order to make the currency to get to the point where you can craft these items, you really don't want to be, rolling that wheel and seeing, hey, am I going to lose all of my progress today or not? It's ridiculous. Anyways, that's pretty much all I had for this video. This is the main reasons why, crafting is completely decimated. Before I go, though, I do want to say a huge thank you to my supporters. The 3 Alexes, Katie, Bearded A, Brandon, Gustavo, Tim, Domosame, Desu, Miss, Jarl, Loopold, Mercury, Nate, Patrick, Rascol, as well as Rocky, Solmonk, The Great Master, Thomas Mass, Maestro, Nailed, Ven Bitters, Nectarion, Noi, Xethion, and Larsis. All I'm asking for, honestly, I don't really care about the prices. I don't really care about any of that. Just give us back the reforges, keeping prefixes or suffixes, because it's the only way to make crafting with harvest not feel like an absolute gamble. Anyways, that is Matthew signing on to the next one. Peace.